as we rushed into the Web 2 era, privacy was kind of left behind.
There was sort of this naive view that users could consent to something that was impossible to understand. People should be empowered and feel empowered. We don't just give up if we're being treated like serfs, right? The serfs have to band together. Can't just be dismissed as privacy radicals or a few activists who can be safely ignored. This has to be a large movement of users. And that is a powerful weapon to use for user rights, for citizens in general, against the central powers.
I'm delighted to be chatting with Brendan Eich today. You've definitely heard of him. He created JavaScript. He's the co-founder of Brave. He also co-founded Mozilla. He's just done a tremendous amount for the privacy space. So thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
So let's start with just a broad overview of privacy, because a lot of the work that you have done in the tech space is focused on privacy. But why privacy? Why is that a big focus for you?
Privacy was one of those things that the cypherpunks in the 90s talked about, and there were some advanced sort of hackers and researchers working on. But then as we rushed into the Web 2 era and people started enjoying things like Google Maps and Twitter and Facebook, privacy was kind of left behind. By the time Mozilla was thinking about blocking third-party cookies, it turned out Apple Safari had something that kind of made third-party cookies not work. There were ways to cheat around it from the beginning. So I think Steve Jobs actually was farsighted about privacy, whereas other browsers and the whole of the go-go Web 2 atmosphere and the dot-com era before it kind of didn't care about privacy. This started coming back to people because they were feeling tracked. They saw ads retargeting them. They saw data breaches that released sensitive information, and they really didn't like it. And yet, in 2011, I believe Mark Zuckerberg could say privacy doesn't matter. But by 2019, he was saying Facebook keeps you private. So he changed the word a little bit, and he made Facebook be in a special position, a privileged position. But it turned out a lot of people over the second decade of the new millennium did start to care about privacy, and they did start to demand it in products. I saw that how Firefox hadn't been able to do a third-party cookie block because of sort of pressure from the ecosystem of ad tech and publishers. And I talked to some of them when I was at Mozilla. So when I found Brave, I said, this has to change. We have to put the user first. The user wants to block all these trackers and these annoying ads and these disruptive JavaScripts. The thing I created, sort of Frankenstein's monster that was loading and reloading and triggering other scripts to load and causing what's called the programmatic ad tech waterfall of script after script coming in, draining your battery because it's running your radio on your mobile device. It's delaying the page load because the scripts have to run to completion before anything can happen. And this was a terrible experience for users. So Brave blocks all this by default. It's been a gratifying experience to build something while the consciousness of the value of privacy was rising around the world, because we got a lot of great early users and we've kept growing. And other browsers have started to come around. They say, oh, we're going to protect you from tracking, or we'll do something about third-party cookies. But compared to, I think, them, we're the best. If you look at a site called privacytests.org, you will see a large number of tests. We don't score perfectly on all of them, but we're, I think, ahead of the pack. And we keep working on this. And the space keeps evolving. So you have to stay ahead of the adversary, right? This is the various big tech companies and some of the smaller fleas upon the fleas' backs of ad tech that are trying to raid your privacy all the time. So we keep working on it. We keep doing well, and it just makes browsing so much better.
But it's interesting, this relationship we have with privacy, because it's complicated, right? People profess that they, don't care about privacy, but when you actually look at statistics, when Apple gave users the option to opt out of tracking and Facebook loses 90% of its revenue or some egregious number like that, our actions speak volumes. And when actually given the choice, people do like privacy. So explain, what's your take on this complicated relationship we have with it? Because my take is that people do care, they just don't understand what's actually going on.
Yes, I think the biggest problem is most people don't know exactly how their privacy is compromised and what the downside risks are until something bad happens. And then it's too easy to say, you have no privacy. I'm a privacy nihilist or nihilist. I can't have privacy. Nihil means nothing in Latin. So there's no privacy. And that's false. There is privacy. Privacy is this complex set of security properties that requires fighting the adversaries out there trying to raid your privacy. And that means you're never done, just like any security problem. Security is never done. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But it means that you can make it a matter of economics that taxes the adversary so that they go to a better place and they don't raid your privacy. Maybe they can engage with you as what are called first parties on the web, where you go to the site and you interact with it like you would with a Gmail or New York Times.
I want to talk about this nihilism because I think this
Yeah.
is such an interesting concept. Privacy
Right.
nihilism, I completely agree. I see that everywhere. I see people sort of feeling like so overwhelmed because they don't quite understand it that they throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I'll just give up completely. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think we used to have computers in our house that were PCs. We had to buy them and set them up, and you had to be your own system administrator, the sysadmin. And it was hard. But in those days, you maybe have fun with, productivity software or Doom or Quake games like that, and you were in control of your machine. Once we got to the point where smartphones were common, I think people couldn't do that. The smartphone has an app store. The app store is curated. It's gate kept. You cannot put on any software you want. You can't put Fortnite on because Epic Games didn't agree with Apple. So it becomes more you're a tenant or you're a serf on somebody else's land, and you don't know what to do because you don't have as many choices. But there were these things that evolved in the era of, let's say, Firefox 1.0, 1.5, even back 2006, I think, called extensions. And among those extensions were ad blockers. So people started realizing there was something I could do other than just be a nihilist and give up. There was something I could fight back with. But then when smartphones came out, the iPhone was 2007, the browsers on smartphones did not support extensions generally. Now, Apple, I think, realized that there was a market here that was underserved, as I did when I founded Brave. Around 2015, the same time as Brave was founded, Apple added something called content blockers, which were like a simplified extension to mobile Safari, iOS Safari, that could block certain ads and could have a certain expressive language over blocking things. And that showed that there was a market because those became popular, and a lot of the extensions that had been on desktop browsers made content blockers for Apple iOS Safari. And that was encouraging to see when we were in the early days of Brave. So people who paid attention, you had to be fairly techie, but you could realize nihilism wasn't the right answer. We don't just give up if we're being treated like serfs, right? The serfs have to band together and form an army or something. You have to do something to stick up for your rights. So the lead users, which is a phrase I use that comes from an MIT scholar, lead users are the people who just use their tools well and know their tools and invent new tools. So lead users created all the modern plumbing tools 100 years ago. A lot of times they made them up. They just did them in their home shops. Or lead users invented whole sports like windsurfing, running shoes, modern running shoes. And lead users are what web developers are. All web developers, I think, are lead users because they invent frameworks and back-end systems and toolkits and JavaScript libraries. And they start to do things like build ad blockers. And they realize the web is this wonderful sort of set of content languages that's fairly open. It's not like a brick of unpenetrable stone that has DRM'd video in it or unblockable elements. It has different pieces that can be blocked or rearranged by design. This is for accessibility. If you are visually impaired, you need a screen reader. You should be able to mix and match and block and revamp the content that you're loading on your browser. There's no copyright issue. You're not publishing it again. You're just taking it down and throwing out the part you can't understand or need to change somehow. And so ad blocking fits within this framework of accessibility rights and general user rights. And so the lead users who knew about extensions, some of them built the first extensions like NoScript and AdBlock and AdBlock Plus, which was a fork. So over time, there was some consciousness among lead users that there's a way forward. It's to block things. And you don't have to give up. And this knowledge spread. And ad blockers became widely used, so widely used that a lot of publishers who were captured by their third-party advertising technology vendors said, I hate ad blockers. If you're using an ad block, you can't read my content. I remember Condé Nast's properties, Wired in particular, was doing this around 2015 or 16. They were saying, you're using an ad blocker, go away. Well, if 30% of your audience is using an ad blocker, you don't want them to go away. You want to let them see some things and maybe find a way to let them in. And maybe there's a better way to get them to pay for your costs because publishers need to eat too. That's fine. We started Brave in this environment of sort of hostility from publishers, but rising awareness among many users, not just lead users, that you could do something about privacy. And it wasn't the total answer. There's always different attack surfaces for confidentiality or other security properties related to privacy. So people like to use VPNs. They were worried about using open Wi-Fi networks in coffee shops. That's okay. And it does help if you have a good VPN you can trust the exit server on and the network that it's on. But it doesn't solve all your problems with those ads and scripts that are embedded. So you really do want something like Brave or a really good ad blocker. A funny thing happened, which was the early ad blocking extensions realized that they had to make money too. Everyone needs to eat. So they said, hey, Google and Microsoft and a few others, maybe Yahoo and Criteo, if you pay us large annual fees, we will let some of your ads show. And so they invented something called the acceptable ads policy. And it seemed like maybe, okay, you need to make some money. I understand. These are better ads. They meet some kind of aesthetic criteria. So you're going to let some ads through so you can get paid sort of shakedown money from the bigs to let the ads through. No, that puts a user in a conflict of interest with the ad blocker. It's not a good situation because then the ad blocker is kind of working for Google. And in fact, Google didn't like it either. I remember when Sridhar Ramaswamy was still running DoubleClick at Google, the ad server, he said, no, we pay them. They still block some of our ads. We don't like them. But this poisoned the well for some users because they used ad blockers like AdBlock Plus and they realized, I'm still seeing ads. What's going on here? And they either felt betrayed or I heard this from IAB UK member in 2016, I think. He said, users who migrate to a new PC don't remember they had AdBlock Plus installed because it isn't blocking enough. So when they migrate, they don't reinstall it. So they just do not retain. Brave had to be pure in the face of this. We never did acceptable ads. We never took money from anybody to let ads show. We just blocked all the third-party threats. And we tried not to block, again, the first-party ads. If you think about, like, say there's a wildlife site with pictures of wild animals, and they want to run a sponsored image that lets you click to go to a charity to preserve animals that are in danger of extinction. And you can click on that, and once you go to that other site, you can donate to that cause. That's fine. That's if you call it an ad or a sponsored image, that shouldn't be blocked. There's no tracking. It's just inviting you to give to a charity. And we don't want to mess with such ads, and we don't. But what's unfortunately happened with a lot of publishers who do these, not charitable ads, but let's say direct sold or house ads, like Elle.com, ELLE, the fashion site. They were doing for a long time in the early days of Brave, they were doing these beautiful takeovers. So you go to Elle and you wouldn't see the fashion story so much as this big ad for, I don't know, Chanel or something, or Hermes. It was a beautiful ad. It was almost better than the magazine, right? So blocking that was not really good. It was not good for the Elle site, probably not for most readers of that site. Problem is that the people running Elle, and I know some of the folks at Hearst, were using Google's ad server to place that direct sold sponsored ad. And they didn't need to. If they'd only used a little old-fashioned web tech, they could have just done it without using Google. But because it had this Google spyware encrusting it, we blocked it, unfortunately. So Brave has taken great pains not to make money off of shakedowns and to try to get first-party ads to show when we can. And it's almost like reverse engineering. You have to say, why isn't this fine ad, which probably should show, performing? Oh, it's because they're using the Google Ads server. Well, can we sort of fake out the page with some custom filters that Brave can load only for that page to rescue that ad and let it show? And so we do this all the time. It means that users have to be brave in the sense that they're willing to fight for their privacy. Sometimes they'll get a hostile dialogue saying, you're using an ad blocker, go away. Sometimes they'll lose out on some beautiful sponsored image or some feature of the site that we block, and we'll try to fix it. But it's an ongoing challenge, and it requires users to sort of help us to be courageous about their role in the ecosystem. Instead of this privacy nihilist passive, I can't do anything, I'm just a serf, I'm being starved off my land, right? And I don't mean to mock anybody who doesn't know what to do, because that's the box that I think the big tech companies want you to be in. They want you to be that impoverished serf.
I also think that the landscape has changed so much in the last decade that people don't understand how good privacy tools have gotten. Because if you look to a decade ago, I mean, there really weren't many options. There really weren't things that people could really do to make an impact on all of the surveillance that was going on the internet. These days, I can literally just opt for better services in every area of my life, for email, for searching, for browser, for VPN, for whatever it is, and just reclaim almost all of my privacy online. It is very easy for the average person to do that today.
Privacy is now marketable. You see, even like I said, Mark Zuckerberg, you see Apple, you certainly see others. We hear about DuckDuckGo, which does work to preserve privacy in certain ways with their search engine, but because it's based entirely on Bing, DuckDuckGo is kind of a front end for the Bing API. They end up having to, or they've had to, in 2022 in particular, make some compromises that Microsoft demanded. And I think, to their credit, they tried to get a better deal over time with Microsoft. So they may have improved things. But when you're dealing with that kind of a reselling of Bing's search engine, you may have to, sing for your supper, and the person who pays the piper is calling the tune. This is a problem in tech all over the place, and Braves had to avoid it at the cost of building our own search engine, which we did. Our friends built it, we bought it, but we're still building it, and it's getting better, like you said.
It's remarkable how much better things have gotten. And I think that people are just uninformed about all the choices that they have now. There is a big gap between the average person who's just kind of working their 9-to-5 job and paying their bills and looking after their family, and the type of tech person who is crazy about all the latest gadgets and want to try out all the latest tools. And there's a big divide there. And I think that it's important that we bridge that divide and we let the average person understand that they have choices out there that can protect them.
Yes. In fact, the smartphone era meant apps, right? Even though you watch Steve Jobs' launch video from 2007, which I do from time to time, he's excellent showman. And he presents the iPhone. He talks about calling, messaging, and the web. And he says the web finally works on a phone. And that's the app model. They don't have an app store at that point. It took 10 months before they launched it. And I talked to a former executive at Apple who said, yeah, we had to port a bunch of native code games, and we didn't want them to not be on the iPhone, so we set up an app store. And that caused all sorts of problems. I mentioned Tim Sweeney and Fortnite earlier. Users feel like they don't have as much choice on a smartphone. And you talk to these average users you mentioned, they don't even think about a browser so much as, well, there's sort of search, or there's the web, or what am I using? Is it even a browser? Maybe they're in Facebook and they're using its captive web views. Maybe they're in TikTok. That can be addressed too by the lead users educating them, because what a lot of people do with Brave, especially on Android, is they make extra home screen icons that launch Brave with their mobile site of Facebook or their mobile site of Twitter X. And it's a much better app running that web app in Brave, blocking ads, than if you use the native app. It turns out a lot of the native apps are using web internally. They have web views, they're loading HTML and images and videos and JavaScripts, and they're probably loading some scripts you should block. So if you run the mobile site version of that web app instead of the native app version of that Facebook or whatever it is, you can run it in Brave and block a lot of the threats, and it loads faster and it's better. And that's something more and more of our users are doing. And I hope we get more users doing this, but it requires some extra work to make those home screen icons. And so, yes, I do run into young people or others who don't think about browsers so intentionally as they do about their favorite app, social app usually, and maybe YouTube. But you can run YouTube in Brave. And here's the kick. This has really been good for our growth. If you do, we block all the YouTube ads because they're festooned with Google tracking. So all the pre-roll and the mid-roll and the double pre-roll and the footer ads, people love YouTube and Brave. And that's been a big win for us. And I think it's the right thing to do because it's too tied into the Google panopticon. I mentioned the first party and the third party that track you. Google's like the infinite party. They see everything, they own everything, they tie it all together, from YouTube to search to Gmail to Google Analytics, and it's now got them in the antitrust court.
Yeah, well, it's pervasive, right? And I think that people think about Google and they think, oh, why does it matter? They're trying to sell me a better pair of shoes, but actually it can get pretty insidious because what Google is doing is creating a profile on you. They're streaming this fire hose of data about you to thousands of companies that you don't know anything about. And if you try to look for them on the internet, you won't find anything about them. But if you look at Google's ad partners, you will see their names at least. A lot of these are shell corporations for governments around the world. There are all kinds of different contractors who are feeding that data to governments. And you have to understand that the world is filled with adversaries who are trying to buy your attention to get you to think in a certain way, to get you to vote in a certain way. And we don't quite understand how fragile we are and susceptible to this kind of manipulation. It's not just about consumer choices. It's about how we live our life and whether we want autonomy in our decisions or whether we want constant, constant distractions around trying to get us to do certain things.
100%. These became, and I think I grew up in the television era of the late 60s and 70s, where there are only three major networks in the US, plus PBS, plus the UHF stations. But the internet is now the mass media communication method that governments and dark forces will try to use to control people, whether they're trying to sell you something or subvert your vote or confuse you in some way. This is a real effect. And we even see now, thanks to the Twitter files, that our own government's been in on this, which is kind of disturbing because they shouldn't have been, according to the US Constitution, in my understanding. But, this has happened. It's been going on a while. It goes back to the television and radio eras, at least. But with ad tech, with the power of this internet technology, they can do a lot more profiling, like you said, detailed profiling. They can do things like geofencing, where they can sort of determine your location, which is pretty terrifying. Why should advertisers know your location? I know that some of them even sold this to other ad tech vendors or to the publishers as, we can tell which aisle of the store you're in or the shop you're in, so we can promote something that's near you. But this has been used, as you probably know, I think you've covered this, for stalking. It's been used for spying and espionage. But it's terrifying that this ad tech exists in such an open way. Like you said, it's very leaky, and a lot of this data ends up going places you never expected, and there's no control or oversight.
Yeah, and it gets a little scary because people don't quite understand the incentive for governments around the world to want to control. I mean, it's something we didn't have to think about when we had 3 television stations and a radio station, right? It just kind of happened, and we would consume whatever media was put in front of us. Suddenly we have this big wide web where we can consume everything. That's really threatening to a lot of governments around the world. They don't want you to just consume everything. And so they absolutely use this technology to direct us towards certain things.
It's part of like I said, the fundamental design of the web. And in many ways, the internet came out of the Cold War. It was for surviving nuclear strikes and so on, but it has emergent properties that are, I think, pro-user and peer-to-peer, more balanced and symmetric. And you have to fight to avoid the natural evolutionary system's tendency to accumulate super nodes in the network, powerful sites that everybody goes to because your friends are all there. So all these asymmetries between the many and the few emerge naturally. It's part of nature, I would say. But you can fight back as a user because on the internet, you run something called a browser, or you should ideally have an operating system that's on your side. And if it is, it can block things, it can remix things, it can intermediate, disintermediate, reintermediate. And that is a powerful weapon to use for user rights, for citizens in general, against the central powers, whatever they may be. And we didn't have that with the 3 networks only. For sure.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I cover, I feel like I have certain content on my channel, and if people will just watch the first half of every video, they would think she hates technology because she's telling us about all the dangers of this stuff, how, it's manipulating us, it's spying on us, there's no getting away from it. Yeah, and then you watch the second half of my video, and it's explaining to you how technology is going to save you and all the tools that are protecting you and how you can protect yourself from all these things going around just by understanding how to use your tech better. I consider myself definitely a tech optimist, and I feel like if I have one job, is to just teach people how to use this technology, because I think it's one of the most empowering tools that we have right now to protect ourselves.
I'm a technological optimist, even though obviously in some ways tools are neutral and can be used for good or ill. So you have to do what you can to make sure they're used for good. And so your educational efforts are much appreciated. And there is a lot of education, and products need to be developed that are simpler so people don't have to be experts. And that's what Brave was about too. We didn't want to require you to get an extension to ad block. It should be just built in. It should work. If it doesn't work right on a site, we'll fix it. We'll try to discover that as quickly as we can. There's ways to do things like gather sort of anonymous information about what sites aren't working and try to fix them without you having to tell us, because a lot of users don't know how to report a problem with the site, or even that there was a problem with the site. And I have to say also, we do customer support on X directly and on Reddit secondarily. And we I love talking to our users. I learned this when I was a young engineer at Silicon Graphics, where we had to work on the help desk one day a month. And I thought coming out of grad school, oh, I'm a kernel hacker. I'm too important for this. But then immediately I started working with people who were using, if not my code, then my colleagues' code. And I realized, wow, there are a lot of bugs here. This is bad. And I help people find workarounds, and I help prioritize bug fixes. And I've kept this ethos throughout my career. And it really, I think, gives Brave a boost, because all the other big browsers, they don't care. Those Google engineers are kind of ignoring the user or mocking the user sometimes. Users are your most valuable asset. They will promote you to friends and family. They will learn to become expert. They will become those lead users who co-innovate and co-evolve the web with you. So listen to them. And if they still don't agree, you can find a way, a setting or an extension they can use, or you can find a way to let everybody be happy as much as possible without necessarily trying to make the browser do everything for all people, which is not possible. So I think users have to matter in this network world we're in. If it's just like television, it's all top down, beaming things into our brains, sort of dystopian 1984 telescreens, which were two-way, of course, then we're going to have a downward spiral into various bad kinds of government and or corporate statism or whatever it is. So users fighting back do matter, and they do move the needle. And this has been shown time and again. I would say even Firefox showed this. People thought the browser wars of the 90s were over. Microsoft had a monopoly on Windows as an operating system. They tied Internet Explorer into it. And even though the US antitrust case punished them for this, it didn't break them up. And IE reached 95% browser market share in early 2004. But in late 2004, Firefox launched, and suddenly people realized, wow, there's a better browser. It has tabs, it blocks pop-ups. We didn't block ads or cookies, we should have. It has extensions, it has a faster, slicker approach. And so people liked it, and that grew. And it inspired Google to do Chrome in due course. And I think Safari was coming out around the same time. And like I said, Steve Jobs put some good features, not only the sort of cookie blocker that he put in, which was to block third-party cookies, but had some loopholes. He put in private windows. Safari was the first browser. So this kind of history, teaching it to people, and then giving people these easier to use tools that don't require you to be sort of a total tech nerd. It's vital to our sort of culture and our world. I think we can do more. We can make products that are easier to use, that are better for privacy. And if Brave goes big enough, I would make a Brave Home Hub. I would make a Brave operating system. People ask about this, right? And of course, Elon Musk says, I'm going to make a Brave everything. I'm going to make a Brave, not Brave, X, of course, X phone, X search engine, X browser. And I wish him well. It's a lot of work. Maybe we should partner. There's no easy shortcut, in my opinion, though. Elon does get a lot done quickly with some top engineers, so I'm sure he's thinking about this. But if there's anything I've learned over the years, it's that you have to be in the fight. You have to be on the ground. You have to be dealing with your users, especially those lead users, and helping them, or you will just get lost. You'll aim for some dream state where you're going to save the world over here, and the reality goes over there. So it's much better, I think, to have a product in the market and grow it. And that's what we're still doing at Brave.
Yeah, I think on the privacy front, I find it somewhat insidious what's going on, because there is such a lack of understanding about how technology works. Because the average user, they don't really understand how internet protocols work. They're just using the tools that say click here. And so
Yes.
because there's that gap in understanding of how this stuff works, people don't actually understand that they need to be advocating for their privacy. So then you have companies saying like, well, what do consumers want? No consumer is speaking up for privacy, and so they're not incorporating it either. And I think it's incumbent upon the actual companies to recognize that privacy is an essential human good, and to be implementing this stuff anyway, making it the default, making it easy to use. I think that it was a great thing after the Snowden revelations when Google and Apple, they kind of changed the course of the internet by making everything encrypted in transit, by Apple deciding to encrypt encrypt the actual hardware of their devices. I feel like companies can make a big difference to the freedom of individuals just by making better choices, whether the consumers understand them or not, but that will just help them protect themselves.
Yes, and I would sharpen that point. I'm sure you agree that we needed Snowden first. So we needed that whistleblower. This kind of whistleblowing is critical, and even big tech companies can then get mad about it and make things better. It requires this consciousness among leaders as well as key people who may have to show courage, like blow the whistle. And we wouldn't be here without it. I think Snowden did a lot of good in many ways that are hard to describe. Whereas the sort of ad blockers, like I said, some of them became sort of a shakedown racket. Pay us money and we'll let some ads through. And I hate to say it, but privacy also became its own sort of captured regulator project for a lot of people who aren't necessarily technically as clueful as they should be. And they would say, let's, in Europe, let's regulate consent for cookies to be set. So suddenly, starting with the e-privacy cookie directive, we got all these banners in Europe on these publisher sites saying, do you accept cookies? And people hate these. It conditioned people to click yes or, otherwise possibly be denied service, be denied the ability to read the publisher content. And it also led to a bunch of creepy crawly parasites, of course, saying, here, use our trust and consent framework. Put our little script in your publisher page and we'll pose the dialogue. And what they do is, first of all, they set a cookie of their own, which they don't have consent to do. And they sometimes raid the publisher data to build a data broker business on the side. So we block the trust and consent framework scripts before they can even fly that dialogue. Some browsers have said, we're a privacy tool, we'll just click no to all those dialogues. And that's difficult to automate, but it's too late. The horses are out of the barn. If the script is already flying the dialogue, clicking no doesn't stop it from setting a cookie of its own and rating the publisher data. So we've neutralized these by cutting the Hydra head off early and burning the stump like Hercules did. So you have to really be aggressive about this. And that's one of the principles with Brave is we block early and often, and we make sure that there's no sort of cosmetic, pretense that we're blocking when we really aren't, or it's too late and something bad happened. But the privacy experts and regulators who tried to do this stuff didn't really know what they were doing. There were unintended consequences. You always get those with regulation. There was sort of this naive view that users could consent to something that was impossible to understand. Well, if you can't understand it, you can't be informed, and therefore there's no informed consent. So who's kidding whom, right? They're mostly extractive businesses that were not getting true informed consent. Whether they were, and I'm not speaking of the publishers here, I'm speaking of the cookie setting intermediaries, the ad tech players, all these dozens of or hundreds of companies you've never heard of that were essentially spying on you if you went to a website without protection like in Brave or like UBlock Origin or another really good extension gives you. That brings me to the other problem. UBlock Origin now is not in the Chrome Web Store, right? This is something that Google's been threatening for a long time. They have their excuses and reasons, but they've sort of undermined the best way for UBlock Origin to do its blocking. Brave is a full stack browser, so we have all the native code in Chromium. We change it at any level we need to, and we do change it to nullify all the Google tracking and then to do things like preserve UBlock Origin, which we offer in our settings still, even though it's not in the Chrome Web Store. And all of our Brave shields share a filter list with UBlock Origin as well. We don't try to miss anything that UBlock blocks. Sometimes the UBlock Origin folks like to turn on something that's a little aggressive, and so we let them sort of experiment with that, and then we try to fold it into Brave shields. But we're generally as good as UBlock Origin. Plus, because we're full stack, we can do things that an extension cannot do by the rules of Google. We can go into the network layer. We can block things at a lower level that requires native code access to the browser code, and we do. But you can see how in the evolution of privacy, there's all these threats from spies that are spying on the backbone traffic that Snowden revealed, or they're sort of grifters who decided to make a buck by whitelisting ads for a fee, or there are these regulators who, kind of a grift too, would say, oh, we'll solve the cookie problem, we'll make the user consent. And it just created a mess. And users hate it so much that we're winning users by just blocking those dialogues.
Are you worried about the future of privacy and this pervasive surveillance that just becomes increasingly normalized in the world?
I'm kind of worried that there's no, like I said, no silver bullet, no final state where you're done with any security property, including privacy properties. So the adversary will always try to out-innovate you. And, even Google was trying to do things for its own advantage, like sort of suck in the publisher content into its own proxy server. So Google would host the New York Times or the Washington Post. It was called AMP, Accelerated Mobile Profiles, but it was basically trying to take all the independence of a website like the former mainstream media stars like the New York Times and put it into the Google Borg cube, like plugged into the Borg cube. So you were actually reading the content served by Google. And then they had these other brilliant ideas like, oh, but then it looks like it came from google.com instead of newyorktimes.com. let's find a way to sign it and encrypt it so that Chrome will pretend it came from NewYorkTimes.com, even though it came from the board cube. Then they said, well, once it's all in this sort of signed blob, you can't block any ads in it. Sorry, it's much better because we can serve it to you so fast in a sort of encrypted blob that pretends it's from the New York Times when it's really from Google. And of course, Google's not perfectly secure, so there could be threats in there, but mainly there are ads you can't block. So this was one of those things where Google was starting to nakedly pursue, even in the W3C standards body, its own interests by saying, let's Borgify the web. We'll host it all for you. Just sign it and we'll pretend it came from your site, but it came from ours. Oh, it's out of date. Well, we'll catch up with your site. We have supercomputers. We're fast. This was not a good move for web developers or publishers or users. And so the fight goes on, and I am worried people will get fooled by this because it never ends. There's always some new gimmick or new grifter trying to say, let's use digital rights management software to protect all those YouTube videos. Now, you see that for high definition Hollywood movies, and that ship sailed. And I don't like it, but it's there. And so, Google has made their Chromium DRM module called Widevine, which is not itself open source. They made that free as in beer to browsers that build off of Chromium. They've been very restrictive, but Brave meets the mark, and we can show you a high definition movie. Otherwise, we would be at a disadvantage in the market. You couldn't watch Netflix or Amazon Prime. On the other hand, most YouTube videos, and the really charming ones from the mid-tier creators, right, and all the up-and-coming people who start out as small creators, are not DRM'd, and they will never be DRM'd because DRM's expensive, it's restrictive, it's nasty. So I'm hopeful that users will insist on no DRM. And that, again, requires a certain amount of consciousness among lead users, people who are aware of what's going on and can make their demands clear to the various technology companies, and can't just be dismissed as, privacy radicals or a few activists who can be safely ignored. This has to be a large movement of users. And that's what I think Brave's user base is now. We have almost 30 million, I think over 30 million this last month, daily active users. And these are real users, not bots. And we're growing a monthly cohort, which is, of course, larger because it churns, that's nearing 80 million or over 80 million now. So we're getting to the big time. People have to choose the right tools, whether it's Firefox with UBO or Brave. The more knowledge we spread and the more awareness, the better.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, users are just a tremendous source of power there too. Voicing your opinion, voting with your choices by actually opting for services that align with your values. I think that we, as users, need to take more responsibility. We need to realize we're more empowered than we think we are. And we actually need to make an effort. We all think someone's coming to save us, and maybe someone will jump in and fix the situation so everything's equitable and fair. But we as users can lead those initiatives. We as users can make those choices. We can encourage our friends and family. And I really hope that people recognize this and kind of step into their power a little more, especially in this new Web 3.0 era, right? You're talking about this centralization of Google Power. They're hosting everything on their servers. It's kind of the antithesis of where I think the internet should go, which is more distributed, giving power back to individuals.
Yes, and we were early in the blockchain scene, but people have various opinions of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I would say generally it's good to decentralize where you can do it and it pays off. And that's a force for individual liberty and user choice. And yes, I totally agree. People should be empowered and feel empowered.
It's just nice knowing that I'm slowly reclaiming little parts of my life and choosing companies that better align with my values.
Users are what we need to stand up for themselves. It's the mass of users who may not be the majority, but they're a critical minority, and they can tilt markets. They can invent new markets or new product categories. And that's where Brave wants to stay and grow and be with those users as we, I hope, grow to the scale where we can have the Brave Home Hub and other things.
I would love that. I'm waiting for a Brave car that is just not going to track my location. I want a Brave Home Hub. Want a Brave camera where it's end-to-end encrypted, because why is everyone using home cameras that is just sending all their personal footage off to random companies in China? Yeah, it's crazy. So we definitely need more privacy products out there. there. And I'm very excited with all of the tools that you're giving people through Brave. It's just wonderful that now they have some options out there.
I mean, it is convenient if you are worried about home security to get one of these camera systems. But if it's sending the video in the clear to some unknown third parties, then that's no good. Even your own government may be abusing it. So I think there is a market there, and that market is smaller than the whole market, but it still has these important lead users. They tend to be more active, more well off. They tend to spend their money on tech more. So they are of interest to many companies, and they need to be made happy with the products in the market. And anybody who kind of ignores them and says, let's just treat everybody as couch potatoes to abuse and surveil is going to miss out on, I think, the future market where this becomes normative because of the lead user effects we're seeing now and in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I hope to accelerate it as well, because I was previously of the opinion, like I began my privacy journey just because I wanted to be more empowered in my life. So I just started researching the tech I'm using, try to, fix that asymmetry that was there in terms of knowledge, because I just didn't understand what I was even turning on. And I was quite happy to just let people know about what I'm learning, and if they find it useful, implement it. I'm actually no longer of that opinion, because I see this dangerous trajectory in society. I see this increased normalization of surveillance. I see increased capabilities of corporations and governments to spy on us. And I see the balance of power shifting really far away from the individual. So now I'm of the mindset that it's not enough for me to just make choices myself. I want to accelerate privacy adoption. I want to shout the word as loudly as I can, get everyone involved, and tell them that the stakes are critical and time is running out. We cannot let that balance of power tip too far, or we will never get our privacy back.
Yes. And I would say in Europe, the regulators, again, there could be unintended consequences. They can be technically misinformed or underinformed, but they're taking steps still, which are making a difference. Even regulators have a role to play here if they are not being fooled by the foxes into designing the henhouse security by Fox Inc., right? That's not a good idea.
Yeah, that's I'm sure there's some corporation out there already creating that company.
Brave always works on improving. We always put the user first, and I think this agenda can win. It should cause other players in the market to behave better. And if we take half the market, I'll be happy. I don't need the whole market.
Half the market sounds great. Well, this has been wonderful. I mean, as I said before, I'm just grateful that we have choices. I'm grateful that there are increasingly awesome products out there that give people back their privacy, if that's something they should care about. I want to see more people caring about privacy. I want to see more education for people about why it's important, why it's essential for a free society. But I think that the work that you guys are doing is just crucial, because we can't use the web without this portal, without this gateway into the web. And that's what browsers and search engines provide. So thank you for giving us private options to do that.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for your work. And onward.
Onward. And privacy acceleration. That's what we need to get to.